The first time anyone saw the man they would later call the Whisper Killer, he was just another smudge of gray in the Seattle drizzle, a silhouette blurred by rain and apathy. His coat, the ash color, hung loosely on his frame as though it had been borrowed from a corpse. Hands buried in pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold, he drifted through the morning commute like a specter. No one noticed him. No one ever did. But the women did. Or rather, he caught them. The ones with hurried steps and keys clenched between knuckles. The ones who laughed too loudly on the phone, unaware their laughter had an expiration date. He memorized their routines. The barista who hummed ABBA as she wiped espresso machines at closing. The nurse who took the same midnight bus, her scrub stained with someone else's tragedy. The graduate student who traced her thumb over a locket when she thought no one was looking. To him, they were already ghosts. He just helped them along. By the time the city awoke to the pattern, 6 were gone. No bodies, no demands, just Polaroids mailed to grieving families. Snapshots of their daughters frozen in mundane moments, tying a shoelace, reading a paperback on the train, blowing out a birthday candle. The photos were always slightly blurred, as if taken in haste or regret. But this story isn't about the killer, it's about the fractures he left behind. Take the journalist, for instance. Ethan Cole had been a footnote in the Seattle Times crime section until he dug too deep. This final article, a half-typed draft later deleted from his laptop, hinted at a name, a face, a motive buried in the killer's childhood. Ethan's body was found in a storm drain, his press badge stuffed into his mouth. The Polaroid sent to his editor showed him mid-sentence, lips parted as if still chasing the truth. Then there were the family. Marta Vega kept her daughter's photo taped to her fridge, next to a grocery list and a coupon for almond milk. Every morning, she traced the edges of the Polaroid and whisper, "I'm still here," as though her voice could pierce the veil between them. After receiving his sister's photo, James Carter took a hammer to his living room wall, convinced her face was screaming behind the glossy paper. It wasn't. The screaming was all his, and at the center of it all, Detective Olivia Kane. She'd been assigned the case on a Thursday, her desk already cluttered with cold files and half-empty bottles of ibuprofen. The Polaroids haunted her, not the victims' faces, but what lingered in the backgrounds. A sliver of a street sign here, the shadow of a clock tower, that clues he'd left like breadcrumbs, taunting her to follow. Olivia had spent years building walls between herself and the darkness, but this killer didn't knock. He seeped through the cracks. The last photo arrived on a rain-slicked October night. It landed in Olivia's mailbox with no postmark and no sender. Her face, staring back, snapped through the peephole of her apartment door. The killer had written 3 words on the back in smudged charcoal: "Let's play detective." The disappearances began in the autumn of 1998, under skies the color of tarnished silver. October had draped Seattle in a shroud of mist, its streets slick with rain and secrets. On the evening Emily Carter vanished, she'd been humming Dancing Queen under her breath, a habit she'd picked up from the tinny radio at the Roasted Bean, the cafe where she worked. Nestled between Pioneer Square's cobblestones and the waterfront's salt-stained piers, the cafe was a relic of chipped mahogany and burnt caramel, a place where regulars swore time folded in on itself. Emily fit there like a well-loved bookmark, her auburn curls tucked under a knitted beanie, her laugh bright and reckless as a struck match. She'd lingered that night. After flipping the sign to closed, she wiped down the espresso machine, her reflection warped in its stainless steel surface. A customer had left behind a dog-eared copy of The Bell Jar on table 3, a single sentence underlined in smudged pencil. "I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree." Emily traced the words, her breath fogging the cafe window as she peered into the street. Was that a shadow shifting in the alley? She shook her head, just the flicker of a dying neon sign. She never made it home. Her third-floor studio, perched in a brick walk-up with a fire escape groaning under dead ivy, revealed a life paused mid-breath. Thrift shop furniture, a velvet armchair with stuffing spilling like innards, a desk carved with strangers' initials crowded the space. Stacks of novels teetered by the bed. Rebecca, The Haunting of Hill House, margins scribbled in Emily's looping cursive. Patrol officers saw nothing amiss. No shattered glass, no upturned drawers, a rinsed chamomile mug in the sink, its tag still dangling, and a journal splayed open on the windowsill. A half-finished poem sprawled across the page. "Autumn leaves don't fall, they let go. Why can't I?" but Detective Olivia Kane's gaze snagged on the boot print stamped on the windowsill. Size 11, its tread patterned like a spider's web. The curtains hung crooked as if someone had brushed past them too fast to care, and on the floorboards near the bed, a single strand of navy blue thread wool high-end knot Emily's glistened under the flashlight's beam. Emily's mother, Margaret, sat on the edge of the unmade bed, clutching a framed photo of her daughter at 16, sunburned cheeks, grass-stained jeans, standing in a sunflower field. The frame trembled in her hand. "She wouldn't just leave," she whispered, her voice a frayed rope splitting under the unspoken weight. "Like her father did. Like you do, detective, case after case." Olivia knelt, her knees protesting against the hardwood, and repeated the promise she'd sworn too many times. "We'll find her." The words curdled on her tongue. The room throbbed with absence as though Emily had been plucked from the world mid-sentence. 3 weeks later, the pattern began to bleed. Mara Jensen, 31, locked up page-turner books, her breath visible in the frosty air, as she reshelved a first edition of the Maltese Falcon, a birthday gift for her father. Her body vanished, but her cat-eye glasses turned up in a dumpster 2 blocks away, and one lens cracked like a spiderweb. Then came Lena Choi, 19, last seen sketching the Space Needle at Gasworks Park, as sunset bled into Lake Union. Her sketchbook lay open to a charcoal rendering of the landmark, its apex smudged by rain or tears. By December, the city buzzed with theories: a cult, a trafficker, a ghost, but Olivia traced the truth in the details. The boot print at Emily's apartment matched tread marks near Mara's dumpster. Lena's sketchbook held the faint indentation of a Polaroid pressed and removed. And always, the navy blue thread, a filament of darkness stitching the cases together. The first Polaroid arrived on New Year's Eve, and slipped into the precinct's mailroom, with no postmark or return address. Olivia held it under a flickering fluorescent light. Emily stared back, caught mid-laugh at the roasted beans counter, sunlight gilding her cheek. But in the corner of the frame, barely in focus, a gloved hand resting on the cafe door. On the back, scrawled in block letters, "Find me." By December, Seattle had become a city of locked doors and sidelong glances. Women walked in pairs now, keys spiked between knuckles like makeshift claws, their laughter sharp and brittle as they scanned every shadow. Storefronts hawked panic alongside holiday cheer. Pepper spray 20% off, GPS trackers in stock, while the Seattle Times ran daily headlines screaming "Whisper Killer strikes again" above photos of pumpkin spice lattes and tinsel. The mayor held press conferences in a sharp black suit, her smile brittle as she vowed, "We will not rest." Still, the police had nothing but ghosts. A barista, a bookseller, a student, bound only by a 20-block radius and the suffocating silence they left behind. After hours, Olivia haunted the precinct's basement, its flickering fluorescent lights casting her shadow like a marionette on the corkboard wall. Photos of the missing women stared back. Emily's auburn curls, Mara's cat-eye glasses, Lena's smudged sketchbook, anchored by the red string that webbed addresses, timelines and scribbled notes. No forced entry, no witnesses, no struggle. "It's like they let him in," she muttered, her voice raw from too much coffee and too little sleep. Detective Mark Ruiz, a bear of a man with a salt and pepper beard and a habit of cracking his knuckles when he lied, leaned back in his chair until it groaned. Or he didn't need to break in. He tossed a stress ball at the board, hitting Emily's photo dead center. Maybe he's someone they trusted. A neighbor, a coworker, hell, a cop. Olivia's gaze lingered on Emily's smile. Or someone they never saw coming. The town hall meeting erupted like a live wire. Families packed into a stuffy community center, its walls plastered with missing person flyers, and a banner that read "Seattle Strong" in faded blue letters. A mother shoved her way to the mic, clutching a graduation photo of her daughter in a cap and gown. She was supposed to walk the stage next month, she spat, her voice splintering. Now she's just gone. The crowd roared, a tempest of "Do your jobs" and "Find our girls," while Olivia stood at the back, her badge glinting like a target under the harsh light. She knew this dance, grief curdling into rage, hope rotting into blame. A man in a Seahawks jersey jabbed a finger at her. "You're letting him pick us off one by one." Later, Mark lit a cigarette in the precinct parking lot, the smoke coiling into the icy air like a specter. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked, his tone softer than she'd ever heard. Olivia watched the cherry of his cigarette pulse like a heartbeat. "Every damn day." He snorted. "Liar. You'd drown in guilt if you walked away." She didn't argue. He was right. The city slept in uneasy shifts that night. Olivia drove to Emily's apartment building, the streets slick and empty, rain reduced to a mist that clung to her coat like static. She stood beneath Emily's window, replaying the scene, the boot print spiderweb tread, the curtain yanked askew, the maple leaf pressed between journal pages. Why this building? Why these women? She retraced to Emily's route home, past a 24-hour laundromat reeking of bleach and regret, a boarded-up bakery with "Go Home" spray-painted on its door, a flickering street lamp that buzzed like a dying insect. Her flashlight beam cut through the dark at the alley behind the building, catching a glint of silver beneath a dumpster. She crouched, gloved fingers brushing aside the wet newspaper and coffee grounds, until she found a pendant, its chain snapped engraved with the initials EC. Emily's necklace. He took trophies, she whispered, the realization slithering down her spine. Back at the precinct, she pinned the pendant to the corkboard beside Emily's photo. First, the journal, now this. Her hands shook as she looped fresh red string around the new clue. What else is he keeping? Outside, the wind howled through the streets, echoing a scream no one else heard. The first body was found on January 12, 1999, by a jogger in Discovery Park, her scream splitting the dawn like an axe through the ice. Emily Carter lay beneath a tangle of maple leaves, their crimson edges curled like dead fingers. Her skin pale as the moon still hung in the steel-gray sky. No bruises, no signs of restraint, just a single thin incision along her throat. A crescent moon carved with such precision it could have been drawn by a calligrapher's blade. Olivia arrived as the mist clung to the pines, blurring the horizon until the world felt like a watercolor left in the rain. Crime scene tape fluttered in the wind, a spectral dance around the body, while the metallic tang of blood seeped into the damp earth. She knelt, latex gloves catching the morning dew as she brushed a leaf from Emily's hair. The girl's eyes were closed, lashes frosted with moisture, as if she had fallen asleep. But the wound told another story, edges clean as a scalpel's kiss, the carotid artery severed with clinical detachment. This isn't his first time, Olivia thought. He's practiced, he's perfect. Dr. Anita Patel, the medical examiner, crouched beside her, adjusting wire-rimmed glasses fogged by the cold. Exsanguination, the carotid was nicked. She'd have lost consciousness in seconds. Any signs of assault? Olivia asked, already knowing the answer. No sexual trauma, no defensive wounds. Dr. Patel hesitated, her breath a wisp in the frigid air. It's clinical, almost respectful, if that makes sense. Respectful. The word curdled in Olivia's stomach. Respectful killers didn't dump their victims in the dirt like discarded trash. She studied Emily's hands, pale, delicate fingertips still smudged with ink from the roasted beans receipts. He took something from her, she said suddenly. Dr. Patel frowned. What? Her journal. She carried it everywhere. It's not here. Mark materialized behind them, a flashlight sweeping the ground. No blood trail either. He killed her somewhere else, cleaned up and then dumped her here. Neat and tidy. Olivia stood, mud sucking at her boots. This isn't a crime scene, it's a stage. He's showing off. As forensics bagged the body, Olivia's phone buzzed. The screen flashed Sarah Mitchell's Seattle Times. She answered, bracing for the inevitable. Detective Kane, care to comment on rumors of a serial killer? Olivia hung up, but the question clung like cobwebs. Serial killer. The term hung over her career like a guillotine blade. The morgue hummed with fluorescent indifference. Olivia hunched over the autopsy report, her coffee gone cold. Dr. Patel had found traces of chloroform under Emily's fingernails. He subdued her first. No struggle, no noise. He wanted her compliant. Her mind conjured the scene, a cloth pressed to Emily's face, her body sagging like a marionette with cut strings. Where did he take her? A basement? A van? Somewhere soundproof, sterile, where no one heard her stop breathing. Her phone buzzed again. Laura, you missed dinner, again. Her sister's voice was a dull blade. I'm working. Dad missed dinners too, look where that got him. The line went dead. Olivia stared at the autopsy photos, her father's ghost flickering at the edge of her vision. The way he'd slumped in his patrol car that morning, whiskey and service revolver on the passenger seat, his suicide note a single line. Trust no one. She pressed her palms to the cold steel table. I'm nothing like him, but Doubt gnawed, sharp and insistent. When Lena Choi's body turned up in Seward Park 2 weeks later, the same crescent wound, same eerie cleanliness, the city's fear hardened into a frenzy. Headlines screamed, "The Whisper Killer stalks Seattle," the name coined by a tabloid hack who claimed the killer silenced his victims with a surgeon's touch. At the press conference, Olivia stood rigid behind the podium, flashbulbs bleaching her vision. "We're pursuing all leads," she said, her voice a monotone lie. "Is it true he leaves no evidence?" a reporter shouted, her fists clenched, nails biting into her palms. "Trust no one," her father's words slithered through her mind as she forced the answer. "We'll have answers soon." Later, in the precinct's basement, she pinned Lena's autopsy report to the corkboard. The chloroform trace matched Emily's. Same killer, same ritual, red string coiled around Lena's photo like a noose. Mark slumped in his chair, scrolling security footage of Seward Park. "He's a ghost, Liv. No tire tracks, no fibers, no. He's not a ghost," she snapped. "He's meticulous. He plans. He adapts." "Yeah, then why'd he slip up with Emily's necklace?" Olivia froze. The EC pendant still hung on the board, its chain glinting like a dare. "He didn't slip up, he left it for me." The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit arrived on a rain-lashed Thursday, the sky a bruised purple, as Agent Carl Walsh stepped into the precinct. His reputation clung to him like a second shadow. 20 years spent spelunking into the psyches of men who'd turned the Pacific Northwest into a gallery of horrors. Olivia watched him from her desk, his wiry frame cutting through the bullpen's chaos with the precision of a scalpel. He wore a rumpled trench coat, its collar speckled with rain, and carried a battered leather briefcase that had likely witnessed more confessions than a church pew. "Agent Walsh," Olivia greeted, extending a hand. His grip was dry and firm, eyes scanning the room like a predator cataloging exits. "Detective Kane." His voice was a monotone hum, devoid of inflection, as if emotion were a luxury he'd long discarded. "Show me the board." The corkboard loomed in the corner, a tapestry of red string and Polaroids. Walsh approached it slowly, his gaze lingering on Emily's photo, her auburn curls frozen mid-laugh, the sunlight catching the edge of her cafe apron. His finger traced the string connecting her to Mara and Lena. Its crimson weave was a spider's thread between their lives. "He's not a stranger," he said finally. "He's the kind of ghost they'd smile at in a coffee shop, nod to in an elevator. The kind they'd trust to hold the door." Olivia's pulse quickened. The man in scrubs. Walsh paced like a caged animal in the briefing room, the fluorescent lights bleaching his pale face. "Your killer's organized, patient, ritualistic. This isn't about pleasure, it's about control." He paused, tapping a marker against the whiteboard. The precision of those cuts, medical training. A nurse, a mortician, maybe a surgeon. Someone invisible, the kind of man even his own mother wouldn't remember. Olivia's mind flashed to the grainy security footage from Mara Jensen's apartment. The man in blue scrubs lingering near the lobby, his posture relaxed, his face blank. She'd watched the tape a dozen times, freezing on his features, a nondescript jawline, eyes hidden under a baseball cap, hands tucked casually in pockets. "You're good," she'd thought, "but not good enough." "His mother's dead," Olivia said, the words slipping out before she could temper them. Walsh stilled. "What?" "Daniel Graves, the surgical technician at Seattle General. His mother was murdered when he was 10. Same MO, single incision to the carotid, no signs of struggle." Walsh's marker squeaked as he scrawled Graves on the board. "And her case went cold, never solved. He's finishing it for her, or punishing the world for taking her." Walsh's eyes narrowed, the first flicker of interest igniting behind his glasses. "Either way, he's escalating. The journalist's death proves it." Sarah Mitchell's email flashed in Olivia's mind. "He's watching me," sent hours before her body was found in the storm drain. The Polaroid of her mid-sentence lips parted, as if still chasing the truth. "How do we stop him?" Olivia asked, her voice steady despite the ice pooling in her vein. Walsh turned, his gaze drilling into hers. "You don't. He's already chosen his next victim." The room tilted. Olivia's hand found the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. Walsh tapped Lena Choi's photo, then dragged his finger across the board until it hovered over Olivia's face, a candid shot from last month's press conference. her expression steeled against the flashbulbs. Daniel Graves lived in a studio apartment above a pawn shop that reeked of cigarette smoke and desperation, its cracked windows overlooking a rain-slicked alley where dumpsters overflowed with the carcasses of picked-over lives. The walls were bare except for a single framed photo of his mother, Evelyn, a faded snapshot of a woman in nurse's scrubs, her pale blue eyes soft as a bruise, her smile strained at the edges. K-workers at Seattle General called him quiet, but competent, a ghost in blue scrubs who sterilized surgical tools with the reverence of a priest handling relics. The kind of man you forget is even there. But Olivia couldn't forget him. 10-year-old Daniel had once huddled under a bed in Everett, Washington, knees pressed to his chest, splintered floorboards digging into his spine. His mother had shoved him there minutes earlier, her trembling finger pressed to her lips. "Stay quiet, Danny, no matter what you hear." The smell of her lavender hand cream, sharp and sweet, clung to the air as his father's boots thudded down the hallway. The screams began at midnight. When he crept out at dawn, he found her in the kitchen, slumped against the fridge, her throat split ear to ear like a second smile. Blood seeped into the grout between tiles, pooling around shattered sunflowers from the vase she'd bought at the flea market. The police called it a burglary, forced entry, tragic case, but Daniel knew the truth. His father's boots, caked with mud, sat neatly by the door. The stench of whiskey hung thick as fog, and his mother's eyes, wide and glassy, still pleaded with him to run. Years later, in a foster home that stank of ammonia and neglect, Daniel stole his first scalpel from the high school biology lab. He practiced on stray cats behind the 7-Eleven, their mews silenced with chloroform-soaked rags, their bodies dissected with a focus that bordered on worship. By 25, he'd perfected his craft. Now Olivia and Mark sat in an unmarked sedan outside the pawn shop, the engine idling like a held breath. Rain streaked the windshield, warping the neon cash 4 gold sign into a bloody smear. Mark crushed a stale donut in his fist, sprinkling powdered sugar onto his lap. "You really think he's our guy?" Olivia didn't blink, her gaze locked on the apartment's window. "Mother murdered, medical training, 0 social ties. He's a checklist, so was Ted Bundy, doesn't mean we can nail him without evidence." Her phone buzzed, a text from the lab. The maple leaf found at Emily's apartment had traces of a rare adhesive used in surgical tape. "The same brand is stocked at Seattle General." "We've got him," she whispered, her voice steady, but her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Daniel Graves stood in the dark inside the apartment, his fingers trailing over his mother's photo. The scalpel in his pocket glinted as headlights from the street below sliced through the curtain. He smiled. They brought Daniel Graves in on a Tuesday, the sky outside the precinct a leaden gray that matched the interrogation room's walls. He wore a pressed button-down shirt, crisp and sterile as a hospital gown, and smiled politely as Olivia entered, his pale blue eyes tracking her like a surgeon assessing an incision site. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, a scent that clung to his clothes and seeped into the room, sharp and clinical, as if the space itself had been scrubbed clean of humanity. Olivia slid into the metal chair opposite him, its legs screeching against the linoleum. The flickering fluorescent bulb overhead cast jagged shadows on the dull gray walls, making Daniel's face flicker between calm and something darker. She dropped a file onto the table, its surface scratched and warped, her reflection splintering in the metal like a fractured mirror. "You think I did this?" Daniel asked, tilting his head. His voice was soft, almost melodic, the kind of tone reserved for bedtime stories or eulogies. Olivia ignored the question. She spread photos of Emily, Mara and Lena across the table, their faces frozen in moments of ordinary joy. Emily mid-laugh behind the cafe counter, Mara adjusting her cat-eye glasses, Lena sketching with charcoal-smudged fingers. "Where were you on the night of October 4th? Daniel glanced at the photos, his expression as detached as a coroner reviewing autopsy reports. "Home, reading Crime and Punishment." His lips twitched. "Fitting, don't you think?" Olivia leaned forward, her palms flattening against the cold table. "Your mother's case file is missing from the archives. Care to explain?" For a heartbeat, his mask slipped, a flicker of tension in his jaw, a vein pulsing at his temple. Then it was gone. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Evelyn Graves. Throat slit in 1986. Sound familiar?" She slid a photocopied police report toward him, the edges yellowed with age. A grainy photo of his mother's body lay atop it, her blood pooling around shattered sunflowers. The detective who handled it retired last year. Oddly, his notes vanished too. Daniel's fingers twitched, his nails trimmed, clean, precise, digging into his palms. I was 10, I couldn't even spell detective. But you can now. Olivia tapped the photo, her voice ablaze. You've had years to study, to practice. He smiled, slow and cold, the fluorescent light catching the faint scar along his jawline. You're giving me too much credit, detective. Behind the one-way mirror, Mark cracked his knuckles, his bulk casting a shadow over Agent Walsh's wiry frame. The profiler scribbled notes in a battered notebook, his monotone voice cutting through the stale air. He's toying with her, wants her to know it's him. Pride, maybe, or something deeper. Inside the room, Olivia pressed harder. Where's Emily Carter's journal? Daniel blinked, all innocent. Who? The barista. You took it. Why? To remember her. To control her. He leaned back, his chair groaning like a dying thing. I don't collect souvenirs. Unlike you. Olivia froze. The room narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat, a frantic drumming in her ears. What? Daniel's gaze drifted to her badge, then lower, to the breast pocket of her blazer. That photo in your wallet, the girl in the sunflower dress. Jessica Cole, right? Missing since '92. You keep her close like a what's the word? He paused, savoring the moment. Memento. The Polaroid burned against Olivia's chest, its edges frayed from years of secret touches. Jessica's laugh, her braids bouncing as she ran through the sprinklers, the way her tiny hand had felt in Olivia's the day she vanished. Her throat tightened, the air suddenly thick with the scent of lavender. Jessica's shampoo, her mother's garden, the last thing she'd smelled before. Mark slammed his fist against the mirror. He's crawling into her skull. Pull her out now. Walsh didn't look up from his notes. Let her play. He's giving us more than he knows. 6 hours later, they let him go. Olivia stood in the precinct parking lot, rain soaking through her coat until it clung to her skin like a shroud. Daniel's final words coiled in her mind, venomous and smooth. You'll see me again, detective. Soon she watched him vanish into the storm, his silhouette swallowed by the neon haze of the city as if the night itself had conspired to hide him. Mark appeared beside her, thrusting a styrofoam cup of coffee into her numb hands. The steam curled into the air like a ghost. He's playing game. We'll get him. Olivia stared at the rippling black puddles, her reflection fractured in the water. What if he's right? What if I'm just chasing ghosts? Mark's sigh was swallowed by the rain. Then we'll haunt him right back. Above them, the precinct lights flickered, casting long shadows that stretched toward the alley where Daniel had disappeared. Somewhere in the darkness, a scalpel glinted. The email arrived at 2:17 a.m. Its subject line, glowing like a flare in the darkness of Olivia's inbox. I know who he is. Sarah Mitchell's words were clipped. Urgent, the digital equivalent of a whispered scream. Detective Kane. I've found a connection. He's watching me. Meet me at the ferry terminal tonight. 10 p.m. Sarah Olivia's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the precinct's silence pressing around her. 3 days earlier, Sarah had sat in a diner booth, sticky with syrup residue, nursing a black coffee as she interviewed Jake Tolbert, Mara Jensen's ex-boyfriend. The diner's neon sign flickered outside, casting a sickly green hue over his hollow cheeks. Mara hated hospitals, Jake muttered, stirring his coffee mechanically. But a month before she vanished, she mentioned some guy hanging around her building, wore scrubs. Quiet, said he gave her the creeps. Sarah scribbled in her notebook, the cheap pen tearing through the paper. Did she report it? Jake snorted. To who? Cops don't care until someone's dead. Later, hunched over her desk in a cramped apartment, littered with case files, Sarah cross-referenced medical workers near the victims' homes. The name Daniel Graves surfaced like a shark's fin in still water. Surgical technician. Mother was murdered in '86. No priors, bingo. She'd driven to his apartment at dusk, her camera hidden in her purse, its lens peeking through the fabric like a watchful eye. The pawnshop's neon sign buzzed overhead as she snapped photos of Graves slipping into Emily Carter's building, his movements fluid, invisible. A shadow fell over her car. She looked up, her breath catching. Daniel stood at her window, his face inches from the glass, his breath fogging slowly. Lost? He asked, his voice smooth as oil. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Just waiting for a friend. He smiled. the expression never reaching his pale blue eyes. Funny. So am I. When Olivia arrived at the ferry terminal, the rain had turned to ice needles, the wind howling off Puget Sound like a dirge. Sarah was gone. 2 days later, a fisherman found her body tangled in marina ropes, her throat slit with the same surgical precision, the wound a crescent moon, gleaming under the gray dawn. Her camera hung around her neck, and the lens cracked like a spider's web. Olivia knelt beside the body, the marina's frigid air biting her cheeks raw. Sarah's hands were clenched, rigor mortis freezing her fingers into claws. She died because of me, because I couldn't stop him. A USB drive glinted in Sarah's coat pocket, cold, unassuming, a tiny coffin of secrets. Back at the precinct, Olivia plugged it in, the file spilled across the screen. Security footage of Graves outside Emily's apartment, witness statements typed in Sarah's relentless prose, and a final interview video. Sarah's face filled the screen, her eyes wide, the camera jostling as if she'd hurried to hit record. If you're watching this, I'm dead. Graves killed his mother. The police covered it up. He's not just a killer, he's a legacy. The screen went black. Olivia's hands trembled, the weight of the word crushing her. A legacy. Mark burst into the room, his tie askew, his voice a ragged growl. Graves's alibi for Lena's murder just fell apart. He clocked out of work an hour early that night. Olivia stood, her chair screeching like a wounded animal. We're bringing him in, now. Outside, the storm raged, the wind screaming through the streets, as if the city knew what was coming. Somewhere in the downpour, Daniel Graves waited, his scalpel tucked neatly into his pocket, his mother's photo smiling from the dark. Olivia worked late into the night, the precinct's silence broken only by the coffee machine's guttural growl and the occasional creak of her chair. Sarah Mitchell's final video played on repeat in her mind, the journalist's trembling voice, the grainy footage of Daniel Graves slipping into Emily's apartment, the damning word legacy etched into the air like a curse. Cold and accusatory, the USB drive sat on her desk, its secrets now a noose tightening around her throat. She barely noticed the hours slip away until her desk lamp flickered, casting jagged shadows over the case files. The clock read 1:03 a.m. The parking garage greeted her with a cavernous yawn, motion-activated lights buzzing to life as she descended, their harsh glare revealing rows of empty cars glistening with rain-slicked menace. Her footsteps echoed like gunshots, the air thick with gasoline and the damp rot of wet concrete. Then she heard it, a whisper, feather light like the scrape of a scalpel against bone. Detective. She spun, hand flying to her holster. The garage stood empty, but the sterile tang of antiseptic clung to the air, sharp as a warning. On the hood of her car lay a single maple leaf, its edges stained crimson as though dipped in blood. Show yourself. Her shout ricocheted off the walls. A laugh echoed from the stairwell, low, liquid, mocking. Olivia sprinted toward it, gun drawn, her pulse a frantic drumbeat in her ears. The door swung shut with a metallic clang as she reached it. She threw it open, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Nothing, but pinned to the cinderblock wall was a Polaroid. Olivia standing at Emily's crime scene, her back to the camera, on a whip. On the back, block letters cut through the white border. You're getting warmer. Back at her desk, she called Mark, her voice fraying at the edges. He was here, in the precinct. Mark arrived 20 minutes later, his hair disheveled, tie loosened. Security cams show nothing. You sure it wasn't fatigue? Olivia shoved the Polaroid at him. Does this look like fatigue? He studied it, jaw tightening. We'll put a detail on your house. No, Olivia said, he wants me alone. Let him try. The taunts began in earnest after a single black rose on her doorstep, petals edged in frost. A voicemail at 3 a.m., Daniel's voice humming. You are my sunshine, the lullaby Evelyn Graves had sung to him decades ago, now warped into a dirge. Olivia's obsession deepened, her days bleeding into nights, her sister's calls going unanswered. She dreamed of Jessica Cole's sunflower dress, her father's service revolver, and the maple leaves that seemed to fall like accusations wherever she turned. One night, she parked outside Daniel's apartment, her Glock heavy in her lap. At 2:17 a.m., he emerged, his silhouette knife-sharp under the sulphurous glow of a streetlight. He walked calmly, hands in pockets as if savoring the chill in the air. Olivia tailed him through skeletal streets, past shuttered factories and chain-link fences crowned with barbed wire, until they reached the carcass of Evergreen General Hospital. The building loomed like a tombstone, its windows boarded, the sign hanging EVR Gen. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and formaldehyde, and the floors were littered with shattered glass and yellowed patient charts. Her flashlight caught a trail of maple leaves, their crimson veins glowing in the beam, leading to the morgue. Daniel stood over a steel table, scalpel glinting in the half-light. "I wondered how long it'd take you," he said, not turning around. Olivia aimed her gun, her voice steady. "Hands up." He turned, his eyes eerily bright, reflecting the beam like a cat's. "You're too late." A woman's body lay on the table, her skin waxen, hair still coiled in a nurse's braid. Not another victim, Evelyn Graves, preserved, embalmed, a macabre monument to a son's devotion. "She's been here the whole time," Daniel said, brushing a strand of hair from his mother's face. "Waiting for you." Olivia's finger hovered over the trigger. "Why her? Why them?" Daniel smiled, the scalpel twirling in his hand. "To make you see, we're the same, chasing ghosts." A crash echoed behind her, a gurney, toppling. Olivia turned, a split-second lapse, and he was gone. All that remained was Evelyn's stethoscope, coiled on the table like a serpent, and the faint hum of "You Are My Sunshine" echoing down the hall. Outside, dawn bled into the sky, the first light catching the maple leaves swirling in the wind. Somewhere, a scalpel glinted, somewhere a ghost laughed. And Olivia Kane, standing in the ruins of a dead woman's legacy, wondered if the chase would ever end, or if she'd become just another echo in the silence.